Hello and welcome to Torah for Women Ministry. I'm Judith Garten, and today I want to talk to you about, is it obedience or obsequiousness that I'm living? Let's find out. I have a heart for God. I have a deep desire to just be close to Him. I also have a heart for following the commandments. Now, there's a difference. And we're going to talk about that. When I say the latter part of that section, right, where I say I have a heart for following the commandments, many people hear me say, and they interpret that as my saying, I'm afraid if I don't follow those commandments, I'm not going to have salvation. But salvation is through Christ alone. But people believe that because they think I have this fear, I must be following and obeying the commandments because I have to. God's going to strike me with a lightning bolt right now if I don't. When they feel this way about me, or they share it with me and they explain what they think I said, they often come across as though they have heard me say that if I don't do every commandment, every single minor detail to a T, then God is going to strike me dead where I stand. Yet that is not at all what I feel in my heart and my spirit, not even close. Now, a moment ago I asked the question, is it obedience or is it obsequiousness? Obsequiousness. It's a noun, and it is the fact of trying too hard to please somebody, especially somebody who is important. Your behavior shows this synonym of servility. Another definition, now that was from that first one was from the Oxford Learner's Dictionaries. The second one is from Webster's Dictionary, the 1828 version. Servile submission, mean or excessive complacence. Now, as you can see from these two definitions, obsequiousness is different from obedience, or at least it's different from how I see obedience. Recently, I was having a difficult time explaining to someone how I see obedience to God's commandments. No matter how I expressed myself, it just would not work. It wasn't understood. It ended with the other person being angry and annoyed with me and telling me to go look it up. It being obedience. So I did. In doing so, I discovered a new word, and that word is obsequiousness. It's a much forgotten word we don't seem to use anymore. I had to practice that one a lot because it's got a mouthful. I discovered obsequiousness actually in the definition in the 1828 Webster's Dictionary for obedience. Irony, right? Obedience, a noun from Webster's 1828. Compliance with a command, prohibition or known law, and rule of duty prescribed. The performance of what is required or enjoined by authority, or the abstaining from what is prohibited in compliance with the command or prohibition. Now this is the key to the definition. To constitute obedience, the act or forbearance to act must be in submission to authority, not servility. There's a difference. The command must be known to the person, and his compliance must be in consequence of it, or it is not obedience. So here you can see that there is an act of submission. Submission implies that there is a willingness as well as a recognition of obedience being the direction we ought to be led to go. There's no force. There's no implied force, there's no coercion, there's no legalism, implied or stated. The definition continues, obedience is not synonymous with obsequiousness. Let me say that again. Obedience is not synonymous with obsequiousness. The latter, obsequiousness, I like saying that word now, often implying meanness or servility, and obedience being merely a proper submission to authority. Okay. This definition actually ends with one simple phrase. Voluntary obedience alone can be acceptable to God, which means obsequiousness is not acceptable to God. So why the difference? Well, the latter part of the definition for obedience clearly shows the dramatic difference between the two words. And obedience to God is being proper submission, voluntary, because that is the only kind He will accept. That willingness in our heart to live in gentle dependence and humility. While obsequiousness is actually legalism. It is servility requiring some level of meanness, sternness, vileness, servility, and servility means slavery or bondage. We need to remember this when we're talking about obedience. If we're following the second portion, where we believe that God is stern and requiring us of some form of bonding to Him, bondage, negative, not a positive situation. There's a big difference between all of that and gentle dependence, humility, and submission. My brain, my spirit, have always had a gentle desire to just follow Him, whatever that means. The instructions for following Him for obedience, gentle dependence, and humility are found in the Bible. However, it is up to us to take a serious look as to what motivates us to follow Him. If we're following Abba because we are concerned for our salvation, for losing salvation, out of servility because we feel God will be disappointed in us, because somehow there is this deep bondage and slavery mentality that we're experiencing, we need to put that aside and we need to take a careful look at it, because even when a lot of women don't believe they are experiencing obsequiousness, I can't count how many say, I am not acceptable to God unless I, and a lot of times what they put after that is a commandment they have made from something they've read in the Bible that is actually not a commandment. We go over a lot of those on Torah for Women's website. If our spirit is dwelling on that strong feeling of eagerness to please, if there is any sense of worry, concern, or fear, and this paragraph is the reason for your obedience, you're actually leaning on obsequiousness, a form of slavery or bondage. Sadly, I hear so many sisters and brothers living in this emotion, and I don't want them to anymore. I want them to realize there is an alternative. What is that alternative? Well, at some point in my life, I just recognized there was a change in my heart. There was no fear, no feeling of being intimidated, no worry about a lightning bolt striking me dead for anything I might do wrong. I recognized grace and forgiveness, and all of those negative feelings were, and that feeling of bondage, or I better do this or else, all of that had been removed. It vanished. And I recognized instead what had taken its place was a simple, humble desire to just be a decent person, a good person. Suddenly, I just wanted to follow God. And to do that, I have to know what that means. And I find that in the Bible. That gentle feeling of submission is what I felt in my heart of hearts. I felt the yielding to Abba, the surrender. There's no negativity of any kind. The interesting thing these days is some have switched the definitions of these two words because of this, and there's too much gray area. Obedience somehow has come to mean legalism, and it's not. In fact, legalism, the traditional definition of legalism or bondage, goes to obsequiousness. So where's your heart? Which of these words is living in you? Take some time, examine heartfelt situations. Examine yourself. Maybe take a Shabbat or an evening and explore how you truly feel. Is there any fear? Please invite yourself to leave obsequiousness behind. Open your heart to gentle obedience, filled with humility. Blessings and shalom.